Thank you very much. Nice to see more of you have come in than it looks as though you were going to when we first sat down. It's going to be a much more interesting session than it looked from the synopsis. I mean, what would you expect when our two speakers, one of them has written, "When I grow up, I want to be a tiger," and the other one has written "Tigers in red weather." We're going to focus on environment, ecology, and we'll get round to government and law later. But we're going to discuss issues which might get a few more nodding heads than we would have got otherwise. We're going to start with basic environmental issues with an Indian slant, because this is an Indian festival and we all know India, but also with Asia and a mention occasionally of the UK, since that's where we're sitting. The question is how to bridge the often rival demands of economic growth and the environment, a major issue in India for years as governments and businesses have tried to push on with development, and environmentalists have tried to save the forests, the wildlife habitats where elephants, tigers and many more animals need to survive. Ruth, I'm going to start with you, if I may. There is growing tension, it's a continuing tension between the economy and ecology, environment versus development. Is this dichotomy real? And if so, how can we fill the gap? In a brief 3 or 4 minutes.
Yes. Okay, so it's a real dichotomy in people's minds. I think, can you hear me? Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, this is for backup in case it goes. Okay. It's a real dichotomy in people's minds, particularly in politicians' minds. It is a real pity that all of the brilliant economists in the world have not yet put their minds to inventing a form of capitalism, a model of capitalism that does not allow for increased growth, because the planet cannot sustain growth, and yet politicians are focused on it. And I want to talk a little bit about the relation of the words economy and ecology, because in Greek, they mean the same thing. Eco comes from oikos, which is our home, our planet. And I think you can see how closely, if I hold this up, which is a pattern of our lung, a human lung, and which is a forest. Do you think this is the forest or the lung? This is the forest. But this is our lung. Our lungs need the forest. We are part, I know I'm speaking to the converted, but we are a part of nature. And so the oikos is the planet and is our home where we breathe. Oikonomia is the governmental control of something, nomos, law, human law. Oikologia, oikologos, is the logic of the home. And you would think that the logic of the home ought to be the same as the government of the home. Alas, they have been separated. And I think that's the cause of so much of what is wrong, that the word development itself is a very compromised word coming from a mysterious word in Old French and meaning something that is laid bare or rises up or is brought out of the earth. But with all that iron ore and coal still in pristine, under pristine forest, ought it to be brought out of the earth? Okay, that's my tuppence to begin with.
Okay. Prerna, would you like to carry on and open this up, including the need for forests and wildlife?
Okay.
A lot of people don't appreciate the cycle that makes it essential to have forests and wildlife, and that you can't just sweep them away as we've been doing for decades.
So, hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here at the British Library. I love libraries. And to be here with JLF, with whom I've been associated for a while, for a long time, so it feels like coming home. So, and thank you all of you. I know there are many competing, very interesting sessions. So I'm very glad you have chosen to come to listen to wildlife, to nature. Thank you. So 2 questions essentially, and I'll answer them in brief. The first, I think you said the importance of forests and wildlife. And whenever I read, if I pick up a newspaper or listen to TV, and I was part of the media earlier, it says Greens worried about destruction of XX forest. Environmentalists cry foul over blah, blah, blah. And I think, is it only Greens, whoever they are, whatever we may be, who need to worry about forest, the destruction of forests or whatever? And therein, so if you're asking me the importance, if I may take the liberty to ask all of you to just close your eyes for, please indulge me, close your eyes for 10 seconds and take 2 deep, those yoga kind of breaths. 1 and 2. And yeah, thank you. Now, if anyone can tell me, whom do we owe these breaths to? Where did the air that we breathed in, and we do so every day, every minute, every second, where did it come from? Anyone?
Trees.
Forests. Thank you. The other? I heard an answer which was correct somewhere. Yes, oceans. So if, as Ruth showed, the forests are our lungs, the lungs of the earth, and the oceans and the seas are the blue lungs. So every breath, alternate breath we take, we owe to the forest and we owe to the oceans. This, the water we know comes from nature, but even the glass does. This is sand, part of it. So everything that you see here is owed to nature, and I don't think I need to now stress the importance, because we wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for forests and other ecosystems like oceans and mountains and deserts, etc. Only a minute for the dichotomy that you speak of, and Ruth has so, explained it. But, the economy rests on ecology. It's a subset of the ecology, because everything, as I just said, depends on the environment. The GDP, which is how we measure development, is such a false measure. It's such a faulty measure. For example, if we destroy forests, our GDP shoots up because there's wood and there are minerals underneath, right? This horrific plane crash that happened 2 days back, I'm really sorry to say it, and this may sound controversial, but that is good news for economies, because it shoots up your GDP. It has a positive impact on GDP, because it means, well, doctors and insurance and more construction, more destruction, what has been destroyed will have to be rebuilt, etc., etc., etc. So what does the GDP, which is how we count our growth, and I'm just ending on one quote, which was given by Bobby Kennedy on the GDP, and he says, I'm not reading the entire thing, but look it up. What does GDP do? It counts the destruction of the redwood, which are ancient forests in the US, California. So the GDP counts the destruction of the redwood and the loss of natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It does not count the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. In short, it measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile. Thank you. I'm done.
And you could, aside from the dreadful air crash, you could have cited war, the demolition, and I'm hoping one of you would like to take this up, the damage done to climate change by the wars that Israel has done on Iraq and is now doing.
I'll take it up.
Would you take that? And there's lots of businesses, lots of GDP growth to come later when Trump annexes Gaza and puts his family in there to redevelop it.
Well, I can take it up with armaments because extractive industries and mining, as we all know, so much of that goes to the armament industry, and the armament industry shoots up with wars. But I just want to come back to India a second. In 2005, India was the world's 5th largest steel producer and the 2nd largest of aluminium. It's now number 2 with both steel and aluminium. Number 2 after China, but China's output is slowly going down. China in 2016 Xi Jinping said, man should live in harmony with nature. And that sounds like going back to 5th century BC Chinese philosophy, but actually it was China's way of putting a new economic and growth policy, well, economic and ecological policy. So that since then, they have been investing in, there are now more than 50% of the cars on the roads are electric. They have made a huge new tiger reserve in the northeast. When I went there in 2020, there were 4 tigers and they came over from Russia. Now there are 90 tigers there. And now they're making a huge new elephant park. So China's output in steel is falling. India's has shown a 6% growth. This magical word growth, which GDP is part of, has gone to 10 million tons per month in June 2022. And India also leads the world in sponge iron production. And what that means is that you have all over sort of something, I don't know, something incredible like 292 steel plants in parts of the country, which means destruction of the ecology and of forests on a huge scale. So all this is going into the arms industry, is going into war, and is fed by war.
And what, go on.
So, just again, just to, so wherever our tigers walk, wherever our elephants walk, and wherever, these are also areas where our indigenous people, the Adivasis, stay. So they walk on mineral gold, wherever we have the tiger pug mark or the elephant foot. These are mineral-rich forests. And therefore, huge areas are being opened up for mining, for industry, for infrastructure. And the thing is, it's a false dichotomy because you kind of believe, oh, we are a poor country. We are not. But we are a poor country, let's develop first and we'll take care of the environment later. So let's destroy the forests. And then, we can't afford, quote unquote, to have a healthy environment because we need to develop. But I, unfortunately, am a resident of Gurgaon, not from there, but a resident. And
a satellite city on the edge of Delhi.
Yeah, it's on the outskirts of Delhi. It's part of Delhi. And you can't breathe. You can't breathe because it's the most polluted, one of the most polluted cities in the world. Is that development? And is the fact that your child's lungs are not developing, that they only work to 1/3 of their capacity, is that something you will take care of later? So environment health is existential. And the last word I'll say here is, when we say that there's a balance, there's no balance. We allow for almost all industries, mining, everything within tiger reserve protected areas. So they are supposed to be regulated, right? But there's no balance. The balance, it's all tilted in favor of development. We allow everything, even and that's not just India, it's a global thing. I mean, we've just had Trump, who has loosened, weakened environmental policies, laws at the rate of 1 a day, more than 1 a day. So every day you have a new bomb thrown in of, allowing for extractive industries, weakening of laws for protected species, etc., etc., etc. And of course, pulling out of the Paris Agreement.
But is there a need sometimes to relax regulations? A senior Congress government official said to me, one who was widely respected, said to me in 2014, when the Congress government in India was being replaced by Narendra Modi's government, he said, it's maybe, he said, not on the record I might add, maybe, he said, it is time to relax the regulations a bit. Maybe the economy does need to be allowed to expand without a lot of the control. Now, at that point, the environmentalists would not have said that the previous governments had done well, though I think now, would you like to pick this one up? And now I think you might say that they're the angels, the Congress, before. I'm not getting into politics, I'm just getting into the environment and how it's changed. In 2014, they looked like terror, and now they look like...
It is politics because it's a democracy. When I've just come back from China, that's why my head's full of China at the moment. And China is pouring money into conservation. I watched elephant experts from Sri Lanka, Borneo, Malaysia, India, and Nepal. I watched their faces as the Chinese showed us these enormous drones. What they're doing is monitoring the very small at the moment elephant population they have. These huge drones, they each cost something like 20,000 something or other, so I'm not sure whether it was pounds, dollars, or whatever. But they were huge and very expensive. And they took two pairs of people monitoring these elephants so that they would come in and see where they were, so that they could warn the villages. And then when they were too near the villages, they would have sirens which were attached to these drones magically, so that the people would go up into the first floor, because the elephants have become very bold. They eat the fields, they get compensated, it's called insurance there, by the government of Yunnan. So there's not much conflict because the people are giving way to the elephants. And of course that takes millions of pounds. And I just watched the faces of these other experts from countries where conservation is starved. But they also knew it wasn't sustainable, because the Sri Lankan guys said eventually, you're going to have, if you go on like this, you're going to have 20,000 elephants here in this area. You can't monitor them all. So it was not a sustainable policy.
Can we go back to 2014 and
Yeah, I just want to go back, because they can do that because they're not a democracy.
Yeah.
And but when you
and you're saying that's good or bad?
I'm saying it's a fact.
No, are you saying that? I'm not quite clear whether you, or maybe the audience is, but I'm not clear whether you're saying China's doing well or it's doing
it's
dreadfully.
Too nuanced, I think.
You're saying this.
It's doing one thing.
But are you saying it's which side are you tilting?
They have different problems.
We know they're different, but is it better or worse?
But John, I can't sort of say it's better or worse. They're doing something, and it's great that they're expanding.
I don't think there's anybody from the embassy in here listening.
Yeah.
So.
But you know, India. I mean, for instance, the Nilgiri biosphere is totally intertwined with elephants and people like that.
So let me
right,
just
2014.
Yeah, I'll come to 2014. Trust me. But just to take off from what she has said. So since we are, I'll address this and I'll come to 2014. So India has the most number of elephants globally, Asian elephants, which is about 30,000. And it's something, lesser actually, 26, 27,000 maybe. And it's a miracle. It's not just, it's phenomenal that, and I'm very proud of India, that we have, with 1.4 billion people, fast-growing economy, grinding poverty, and even when we weren't a fast-growing economy, Project Tiger began in 1973, and therefore the politics comes in, because we had a political leader, that is Indira Gandhi, who was greatly interested in wildlife, who was visionary when it came to the environment, and she brought in all these laws which protected our wildlife, tigers, Project Tiger, for bustards, for all, and we brought in the wildlife law, the forest conservation law. So you had that, and you had people who were not just tolerant of wildlife, but who accept wildlife in the landscape. I've gone to areas where people have lost an entire crop and they are grindingly poor. It means their income is gone if the elephants come in and destroy their crop, the entire harvest in one night. And they'll say, but even they have to eat, unko bhi to khana hai na, unke bhi bacche hain. And they won't, well, there are incidents, there are revenge killings. So it's a combination of these two that has, and UK, for all its development and wealth, has not managed to save one predator. And I'll come to that later when we talk of conflict. On 2014, when our government changed.
Can we stay on the elephants for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Is 25,000 to 30,000 elephants too many?
No.
Too many for what?
That's the question. Don't challenge me.
No. No.
Is there a limit?
No.
I'm not saying it should be limited or they should be culled, but I mean,
our numbers.
This is one of your subjects.
No. So we say, oh my God, our numbers are increasing. Actually, so even like, we say that we are a success because our tiger numbers are increasing or elephant numbers are quote unquote stable. The problem is the habitats are declining. And even with tigers, we have, our numbers have become stable, our protection has become good. But if you look at it, local extinctions are more. I would say to me, a better reference is, this is a tiger reserve. Does it have optimum tiger numbers? Not just numbers. Can it hold more capacity? Why don't we have it? And so to me, that is, so we don't have enough. Our elephant population has actually declined, which is like being, spoken about in whispers, and no one wants to say it, and so they are like dilly-dallying with the census. The problem is not an increase in elephant population. The problem is we have no space for them. We're not giving them the space they need. They are large-bodied animals, intelligent, emotional, migrant, and she's doing a book on elephants, so she'll know much more about elephant ecology. So.
How many elephants can India manage?
I don't think that's quite the answer. It's really how much habitat can it manage?
Yes.
Well, there's also the question of how it is managed. And I mean, elephant reserves are not protected areas in the same way that tigers are. I mean, it's very interesting because they are migrant animals. I mean, that's one of the problems. The tiger's goal in life is to have a territory and to stick with it. I mean, it's a smallish territory if it's a tigress and a larger territory if it's a male. Elephants are nomadic. They walk, they evolve. They have to eat 16 hours a day. And because they have one sort of design system, which isn't really a design system, is their digestion. So they have to eat 16 hours a day. And so they evolved to eat and walk on quite a long way so that the vegetation behind them regrows. And that's a real problem for elephant management. And so they have corridors. So you can speak to the corridor management.
So essentially, I don't think it's a number of how much we can manage. I don't think I can pull and that's what I think Ruth also referred to, you can pull a magic number out from a box, and yes, we can afford. The thing is, as I said, in most countries, in most of the Western world, which India and most developing countries like to aspire to be, but they have been abysmal in their environment and wildlife conservation. So what we need to figure out is, as she says, how do we conserve them? How do we manage them? How do we protect space for them when there's so much competing users you want to develop, and there's no end to your growth aspirations, and a lot of it is, it's too complex to explain. But the problem with elephants also is that while the elephant is protected as much as the tiger is, their habitat is not. It is not like it doesn't have a legal status. So, the forests are being, and wherever the elephant is, the minerals are. So it is being mined and therefore used. So these are the complexities which are very difficult to explain in like 1 minute.
There's one way of managing them in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has the highest intensity of a human-elephant conflict in Asia. I don't know about Africa. I can't speak to Africa. But so what they do is it's all used electricity. Electricity. So I've talked to a family that are growing up behind a live electric fence. The problem with a live electric fence is that if you have a thing low down and one branch goes across it, it breaks the circuit and the elephants can walk through it. Also, elephants are very good, very clever at working out. They can press it with their trunks, a male elephant, so that they know that doesn't conduct it, or they can drop a stone on it. So there are also enormous things. I find them absolutely terrifying, but they are tall structures like this with things hanging down, like fly curtains in a butcher's shop. And so these are just live electric filaments hanging down like this. Not enough to kill the elephants, but enough to sort of stun them and keep them away. They have to be very firmly fixed in the earth. And so they are experimenting in Sri Lanka with putting these things up while the harvest is there and then taking them down. So the elephants don't get used to trying to get around them, and they can come into the land at other times. So in Sri Lanka, there's a very sophisticated way of trying trying to experiment with those things?
So I think the audience who, like, you'd stay in a very safe place, whether it's London or whether it's Delhi or whether it's Bombay or wherever it is. And it's very difficult to imagine how it is to live with elephants. So I've been to places, and I'm sure you have, where, like elephants and people live in the same landscape. And you can't get out of your house because there might be elephants. And elephants don't kill to eat, but elephants will just like, because they're enraged, because they're stressed, because they don't have space, and one whack and you're gone. I mean, it's too complicated why they kill. But India loses 500 people to elephants every year. That's horrendous. And we still don't kill them. We still don't kill them. We don't officially hunt elephants. And of course, elephants are killed at times as revenge, but also revered as Ganesha. So it's very complex, very complicated. And yes, there are ways to try and mitigate them, but till you protect their forests, it's
quite good and very unusual to have a conversation like this about elephants. Normally it's tigers, and it's tigers, and so it should be. But I don't think I've sat in a session like this where we've stayed on elephants for quite so long, and that's why I let it run, because it is important, it is interesting, and but maybe you might like to comment on. Villagers treat, I think, elephants differently from the way they treat tigers. If they see tigers around, they're going to run away or walk away. If they see elephants, they sometimes decide to go with them. They sometimes try to hurt, to tease them. They don't focus in the same as a crowd. I've seen crowds.
Well, I think it's pretty much.
The attitude is different. The fear level is different.
So
the conflict is different.
The fear for elephants is far greater. The fear for elephants is far greater. The fear for tigers is not as much.
Oh.
The fear for tigers, I mean, most villagers, though, I mean, if you see a tiger amongst your, like they do, it all depends. Like they might just start attacking it, like they'll start beating leopards, that I know. Or they might start chasing elephants, but I still think there is still a lot of relevance, and what we hear of this kind of behavior, of conflict, of people dying, it's just because it's the bad news that goes out. We don't talk about how they live in acceptance, in tolerance, in coexistence. They are there today because of that. I mean, in London, you won't tolerate a mouse in your house, would you? If you see a spider, you want it out. Right? So I was part of a rewilding conference in London, Cambridge, and they spoke of farmer loss, crop loss due to caterpillars. I couldn't get my head around it. I mean, like, we have elephants and gazelles and deer and wild boar and tigers and leopards and wolves and like, I'm not undermining this loss, I'm sure, but you don't even want, I mean, UK doesn't want to even hear the W word. Why don't you want your wolves back? I can't get, there's such amazing creatures.
Britain is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. And Scotland helps it. If it wasn't Scotland and Wales, it would be worse. But we're always afraid of the wild, and there is always this trying to protect our property. I was once in the Highlands of Scotland talking about tigers, and it was in a wildlife zoo up in the wilds of Scotland, and I gave my talk about tigers, and they had some very nice tigers in the park there, and everybody was interested, and there were 5 minutes into audience questions. We suddenly switched from tigers, and the rest of the time we were talking about badgers, because badgers were the animals that were eating their chickens. And that's the thing. If you have something that is sort of aggressing you, like I don't particularly like rats in my garden, but you have, it's the human condition. And yet we think with them, we believe with them, and in India there is this, as Prerna says, the most incredible acceptance. I've been in places in villages, and we've seen villagers whose husband was killed by a tiger, by an elephant in the middle of the night. A tiger that had been enraged by somebody else because it had been in the field and somebody had driven it out with firecrackers. It was all het up. It came into her little compound. It took the roof off the hut. It picked up the pallet on which her and her husband were sleeping, and she fell off and broke her shoulder. It dashed the man on the ground, and it rampaged around. It must have been terrifying. There was no big tree there, even a tree it could have. But she still said, the elephant needs to eat, it's not its fault. Extraordinary.
Right, let's go back. That was great. Let's go back to 2014 and the issue of government policy, and is there a need to relax, and then the different I was spelling out, and I interrupted it and took us off on this marvelous elephant hearing.
Okay, so I mean, for people who live on another planet, India was largely dominated by the Congress government. Of course, we had the BJP coming in 2004, and traditionally the Congress government, because Indira Gandhi and they were very visionary, as I said, in environment and wildlife laws. But post 1997, when the opening up of the economy always had its terrible impacts on wildlife. And I worked with both. Well, I'm trying to work with this government, but I worked with the earlier government. Let's just say that we are unfortunately globally in a situation, including the UK, including the US, including Australia, including India, in a situation where governments are anti-environment, and you see environment as a hurdle to growth and development. So the easiest thing to do is loosen labor laws, loosen environment laws, loosen forest laws currently. And so, well, the difference, and I get that what you said, a Congress government politician said that it's time to deregulate. Well, they had loosened laws, but there was a limit to how much they would go. So how much they would do. There was some kind of basic framework still standing that protected our environment. Post 2014, that winner is gone. At least that fig leaf was there that we are trying to protect the environment. That's gone. That's completely gone. It's now like the Ministry of Environment and Forests has advertisements which says how many clearances they have given, how much forests they have given away, how rapidly they have given away our forests. So more than that, they have drastically weakened the policy and legal system, the laws that protect wildlife. And I'm one of the persons who has challenged, we are a group of 13 who have petitioned, including bureaucrats, former bureaucrats, top bureaucrats, who have challenged a new forest law which will essentially allow, it weakens all regulations that conserves forests. So it allows for forests to be diverted very easily for industry, mining, etc. The key problem is a lack of engagement. And it's, again, I say it's not just India, but it's, we don't have the engagement with civil society, that space for dissent. And again, it's not just the environment, as we all know. So what is more problematic is that space for dissent is shrinking, and the groundwork, the grounding on which our environment forests stand is weakened hugely. And it's again comes to, and while we still pay lip service. So I'm sorry, Ruth, I would take it with a pinch of salt that China is doing all these things, because, I know what goes on in India, what is propaganda and what is real. Of course, there are some good things happening in India, and I'm sure some good things happening in China. But what is the reality? We don't know. I would always take whatever governments say with a pinch of salt, because we don't know. They give the information they choose to give. And China might be even more of a seasoned at it than India is.
Yeah,
because
I agree. And also this government too, for instance, do you remember the badger cow? This was in the Tory government. Okay, so the great lobby there, and this is where lobbies and in a way, farming is an extractive industry too, I suppose. But where lobbies affect government. So Cameron ordered a review, a scientific review. And a friend of mine who works at the Zoological Society was part of that review, and how much badgers affect the TB of cows, and what a badger cow, that is people shooting badgers, would do, and how would it affect the cows having TB. The real problem with cows having TB is that all the cows are too close together. But anyway, so they did a 2-year review. They came out anti the badger cow. The farmers' lobby got at the government. They didn't like it, so the government changed it round, and so it came out. My friend took her name off the review, and it has been exactly what they said. What's happened is that by shooting badgers, and sometimes not completely killing them, the wounded badger with TB drags itself to another area, so it spreads the TB further, so more cows get it. So it's an example of government policy trying to fit in with what the large slices of voters want. And I just want to go on a bit about, because UK now has got a new government, and we all hope for new conservation laws, but it is weakening the building laws for the green belt. And the big thing is, everybody here will know about water. Water has become there is water there are plastics, antibiotics, toxic chemicals in every single river in England. Beautiful little chalk streams that are unique everywhere. And why has this come about? Because Thatcher privatized what should never be made private, which was water. And eventually it could only be solved. But it was solved before. We had open sewers running through Victorian London, and it has been solved. But it needs political will, and everything comes down to political will.
You're so right there.
Okay, let's move. I'm not saying you weren't on the agenda, you were, but let's move on to what we were billed to be talking about, which we've had such a nice time we haven't even touched on. What can companies? This is what we were supposed to be talking about, because there was supposed to be a companies guy, a public relations, government affairs guy sitting where I'm sitting, or sitting where you're sitting. And he couldn't get here, fortunately, so I was drafted in to do it. What should companies do? I mean, we all know the worst companies. We're not going to name them, but we know the worst companies in India. Lots of companies that aren't the worst are also pretty bad. Would you like to go first on?
Would you want to go first? First, and then I'll follow.
Okay, I'll go first. I mean, when I was doing my tiger book, I talked to different. The companies are so different. Okay, so I didn't talk to any mining people, but for instance, palm oil in Sumatra. I talked to one particular palm oil company had an ecologist. He was a very good man. He was a scientist. He was a well-trained scientist. So he was doing things in a small way. He would go around checking that checking on traps, checking on palm oil pipes and dimension, things like that. So that they can have them. In Borneo, which I recently was seeing, because that's the most, for elephants, that is the most recent kind of confrontation, because huge areas have been taken of palm oil, but there have been people who are saying, leave a little bit for the elephants, leave a little bit of forest, grow forest trees in your plantations, let the animals go in. They won't harm the palm oil trees, they don't want to eat them, but let them have other trees. So they can do something in a small way, but of course what Prerna is going to talk about is much larger.
No.
You've got 3 or 4 minutes on this.
Yeah.
So, corporates are supposed traditionally been the enemy, because especially extractive industries. To me, even a tourism, when you're talking about, say, around protected areas. So I don't look at, that's how much, do you have pollution? Are you are you using renewable energy? Those are certain measures. How well do you control your pollution? Do you have the latest quality, etc.? Technology oriented, right? So we are going in that direction. We are investing in the technological bit because that's also growth related, GDP, we want better technology. But what we aren't looking at is, if you're looking at a mine, where is the mine being placed? If you're looking at a power plant, say you're looking at a thermal power plant, which is going to come up in central India, Chhattisgarh, which is both mineral rich, forest rich, with Adivasis, indigenous people dependent on that forest. You're not looking at what is our demand for electricity. How efficient are our power plants? Do we really need this one? Do we need to make our power plants more efficient? That is where we need to go to. But no industry or no business is going to think of that, because it means that you're not getting the land which you get at a cheap rate because you're going to produce power. So and I have done the numbers because I was part of a national level committee which looked at development issues, and so should this mine come up in this forest? Should this road come up in a forest? And believe me, we had roads, so like, one permission will come for a road here, and 2 kilometers down, some other company will come up with a road 2 kilometers down, goes the same way, because it's about contacts. It's about getting that land for free. Practically, you do pay something. So all I'm saying is that business needs to look at where are they placing their industries? What is the impact? We need cost effectiveness. What is the advantage economically? Who does it? Does it only, is it only benefiting the industrialist and, the X number of employees that come from big cities? They might employ the local people to clean their toilets and clean out just the grade 4 jobs. Sorry, that's mine only, so it's okay. So, I mean, and then what are the costs in terms of the environment? The fields downstream, when you open a mine, are all laid waste. It's not just the mining area that goes. It lays waste the water sources of the people. So we don't have anything which looks at the real impacts, which looks at cost effectiveness. And I think just adhering to those, just adhering to the existing laws, which never happens. And frankly, I mean, again, I think I'm being a little more too blunt, but it is the lobbies which drive the policies and laws, which is why we are seeing a weakening throughout globally of our environment regulations and laws.
Yes,
so just a second.
Yeah.
I'm going to open this up to questions in a moment, but I've got one more speaker here before I do.
I just wanted to say that, does anybody know who invented the phrase carbon footprint?
Invented?
The phrase carbon footprint. It was the oil companies, because they wanted to make us feel that the individual was responsible. I've said it. It's the oil companies invented the phrase carbon footprint.
Okay. And can I just say one thing? If individuals, we spoke about governments, we spoke about corporates, what should individuals do? All of you are here, right? We need cloth bags and like using glass instead of plastic, but please get political. Please be more aware, choose the right key, hold your governments accountable. It's the only way forward.
Thank you. That, of course, was a comment on British politics, not Indian. In case anybody thinks. There's a question there. And others? What may I ask?
I couldn't hear what you said with the last one because of this, sorry.
I want to pick on elephants, and there's a reason for that. I worked for many years in Kenya, and I'm familiar with the African elephant. What I want to ask is, in India, I'm aware, first of all, I wasn't aware that 400 people die.
500 odd people.
I'm aware of people dying because of tiger attacks and tigers being killed by villagers. The question I have is, what's the government's position on protecting human life and protecting the elephant, given the fact they're opening everything up to the industry.
I should have said, if you want to direct your question at either
Both
of the
of us
speakers in
can
particular, or just leave it open.
Both of us can take it.
I'll
yeah.
leave it open.
Yeah.
It's, a lot of it is state government, so it happens locally. I don't know, Prerna knows much more about North India, but in the Nilgiri biosphere, it'll be up to, first of all, the state government, and locally, if there's a, for instance, in Kerala, recently there was an elephant which had been taking rice out of people's grain stores, and people understandably got very cross and angry, and there were accusations that he'd killed people and so on, and they demanded, children were dragged onto state television and said, I'm afraid to go to school. There was a whole lot of pressure about that they have to take this elephant out. So that's one thing that happens, is that the state forest department is asked to remove that elephant, which they do by tranquilizing it and then putting it on a truck and maybe putting it somewhere else. And it had a whole history, that elephant. So that's one thing that happens, that there is local pressure to remove an elephant who has killed people. Yeah.
Okay, so both central and state, the center will has certain policies, and yes, as Ruth says, it's the state which executes it. So you give compensation both for crop, for human injuries and human life, and it varies from state to state. What also varies is how fast and how empathetically you deliver it. There are also ways to prevent it, to mitigate it, and I must hand it out. We're very quick to criticize the forest department, which I am one. I'm a great critic, but I'm also an empathizer, because when a tiger kills a person, who goes? The forest department, and the people take their ire out on these people who are also, these guards and staff who are also very poorly paid at times, and from the local communities, and they face the ire of the people. I've seen them being beaten. I've seen them kerosene being thrown at them. So it's a very difficult situation. And what they do is, so the thing is, we have a lot of good measures, like you would have, like what you spoke about, fencing, etc. Also there in India. But also what you have is, so suppose a tiger, I did my research, my PhD research in a place called Tadoba in central India. Some of you might be familiar. Over 50 people lost their lives to tigers there last year, 50. The year I was there, 42. So, and it is one of the most as compared to elephants, we have about 200 people, 250 odd people losing their lives to tigers. We don't kill a tiger who has killed one person till it is an established man-eater. At the first instance, it is given the benefit of doubt. What will happen is the forest department will move in. You're not supposed to go out at this time. There'll be presence over there. The tiger will be monitored. There will be people patrolling that area, telling, their presence will be there. A lot of that don't go out at this time, don't go here, the tiger's there. And so whenever, even if there is a tiger presence in a village, these guys go out, local community people are trained who are the first line of defense. So a lot of good local things are happening, a lot of not so good local things are happening. It's a very complex situation, very difficult to understand, very nuanced, but we are trying. I won't ever say that India is not trying, because we really are in a difficult, challenging situation.
There was a curator of forests in 1997.
Can we move on to the next question?
Oh.
There's a question over here.
Might I hear that point?
Okay, there was a curator of forests in 1997, and I think Bengal, who has said elephants changing. Elephants are changing, and even the females are attacking people now. And they were changing because the forest was cut down, more people were encroaching on the forest, and so they were coming more into contact with elephants. They were protecting their crops. And as Prerna said, I mean, it's terrifying. You plant a whole lot of little seedlings, and one elephant walks across them all in a night, and that's your and your family's food for the rest of the year. That's the stakes. And so there was more and more conflict. Elephants are driven out with firecrackers, sprays of bullets, and this curator of forests warned in the mid-90s they're changing, and now they're changing. I've lived stayed with people, the Davidas down in Tamil Nadu, And they warned me, do not go out, look where you are. Elephants might be anywhere. They're the color of shadow and they move very fast. Just to go from my little place to the bathroom, I had to watch out for elephants because they could attack you because they are so keyed up now. That's why they're doing it. Priya's father walked through that forest in the mid-50s and never worried at all. So that's what has happened in that time.
So elephants, I mean, it might sound odd, they are my favorite animals and they're amazing animals. Elephants will not attack its own, no animal will attack you unless they're threatened, unless they're cornered, unless they're defending their young. If you see elephants in an area which is dense forest, they see few people, you have nothing to, have walked those areas. But if you go to an area where elephants are constantly chased, constantly, harassed, because you have fire thrown at them, you're air shooting them or all those kind of things, those elephants are stressed. They react so yes, she's right. They're changing. And especially in areas where conflict is high, you'll see that the elephants are more aggressive. And there are also scientific papers which establish that.
And they get harassed in a way that other animals don't, that other wildlife don't, which is what I was mentioning earlier.
Because they can do more damage to your life and your livelihood than anybody else.
There's sheer science.
Forgive me, John, I interfered with your chairing, but this
not at all. Without your question, we did very well, but we'll now have your question.
And what you brought up just now, yes, you said that no species will react violently unless threatened, except us. And we, of course, have been responsible for so much despoliation without an evident threat. Now, what I'm so struck by with both of you, and you both in your different ways said you're preaching to the converted, and that's true to an extent, and yet I wonder, some of us might work in government, some of us might work in companies, some of us might also have countervailing interests, like we have children and we care about their future, and so the message must be spread to everyone, and everyone must be concerned about the urgency of the situation. Now, some of the issues you described are, they've been ongoing, species depletion and so on. Climate crisis, of course, has an urgency that could potentially, be existential and can be communicated to people. I guess the question to all of you is, with so many points of action, democratic governments, populist democratic governments, non-democratic governments like China, corporations which in some instances have more power than governments. The urgent task for those of us who care about these things, or rather who recognize that everybody needs to care about these things, there needs to be, I think, right now, some urgent coordination of strategies across different. And are you a part of? Do you feel you're a part of that, of a coordinated strategy across lots of different?
Not very coordinated.
No. Divide and rule is a very, very, it's what the corporations do.
Also, it's very. Environmentalists are considered anti-national because you're anti-development, and that's in most countries where there is a crackdown.
Yes, but it's stated more in some countries than in others.
But we saw it when there are. We saw it in the UK. It's certainly there in the US. It's certainly there in India.
Yeah.
Because it's a very isolating thing. When people talk about, like yesterday, I was reading in the newspaper, Arunachal Pradesh, such a stunning state, such incredible old growth, evergreen rainforests, and they're all going to be drowned in, they're making it a hydropower state. And so you'll have one hydropower dam after another, drowning, I don't know how many acres of rainforest, displacing people. At what cost? And no, it's very isolating. There's no coordination. See, it all boils down to we need political will, as she said. We need political will to conserve. We need to understand that growth can't be at the cost of environment. It truly has to be factored in the ecology.
And we mentioned briefly earlier the problems that wildlife. We're almost finished. What the wildlife officials have, and because when they try and follow regulations and make life difficult for companies and for for people who want to do projects. They get moved on. There's a story the other day about the chief wildlife warden being dropped from the committee that would decide on how many tourists could be allowed into the Gir sanctuary, the lion sanctuary, because the number of tourists is very important. But the chief wildlife warden, who might have tried to influence the debate to go against whatever Gujarat and therefore the Prime Minister and all sorts of other people, because he's very fond of his lions, would have wanted, got moved out. That often, I mean, there's many examples all over the country. And I wondered if you might like, because you must know some of the people who get moved.
Yeah, people get moved if they do. I mean, that's everywhere, right? People get moved.
Yes, but it's more so.
It's more like because you're also so. I just, you know, if you make decisions and they're uncomfortable with the powers that be, whether you're in media, whether you're in government, whether you're, so you're not in a very comfortable position. I would just before
last remarks.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak for a minute on something, if I can divert the topic, because initially we saw who did. Many of you were there in the beginning, and you know who. Okay, any of you had the whiskey that was being served yesterday and day before, which was Godawan. Okay, so Godawan whiskey has sponsored this session, and Godawan, the whiskey is named after this bird. Anyone knows what bird it is?
Yeah,
the great Indian bustard. Who said that? Hey, thanks. And do you know it's one of the most endangered birds on the planet? There are fewer than 100. And what is the thing that is endangering them? It is in Rajasthan, the same state you would go to see tigers, in the desert areas. Lot of issues why the numbers are down to, first they were hunted primarily by the British, and then loss of habitat, but now it is renewable energy. Huge amounts of their areas, the desert, is being taken over for solar farms, taken over by wind farms, which are owned by huge companies. So therefore, that whole thing about corporates. And these, because they are renewable, are being given at a hugely subsidized rate. But they are killing the habitat of this bird, and they will lead to its extinction. Again, is it worth it? And have we factored in how much does, what is the cost of giving that habitat? Okay. What is the footprint of losing that forest where it stays to renewable energy? I mean, is it an answer? I think what I'm urging you to do is ask questions on everything. Don't accept
Ruth,
anything at face
the
value.
last 2 minutes, the last 2 minutes are yours.
Is, go around asking all the economists you can you produce a model of capitalism which does not include growth? Because we are overusing this planet at the rate of 1.5 to 2 times what it can sustain. And eventually it's just going to be hollowed out and we're going, so you need to find a new way of doing things in which development is development of quality of life for the forests and for the wildlife and for ourselves, and not use. That's my
it.
shot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.